It's the time of year where we'll be having lots of feasts, lots of time spent with friends and family, eating large amounts of food. And for some of us, it leads to obvious questions, such as, why do I feel hungry? Why do I feel full? And for a lot of us, why do we get a food coma after eating so much at specific meals? Well, let's talk about that.
Warning! The following presentation contains information that might contradict what you have previously heard, or believed to be true, about how the human body works, and contains material that is not suitable for closed-minded individuals. Enjoy!
When we start looking at why we're going to choose to eat, what foods we're going to choose to eat, and how much we're going to eat, it all boils down to a whole host of hormonal signals and neurotransmitter signals that are going to regulate types of responses we're going to see. Hormones such as gastrin, GRP, CCK, ghrelin, leptin, insulin, glucagon, GLP-1, oxytocin and PYY, just to name a few. Hormonal signals that will change neurotransmitter signals such as serotonin, dopamine, and endocannabinoids, which will alter secondary hormones such as POMC, beta endorphins, neuropeptide Y, and melatonin, all in an effort to either drive us to eat foods or keep us from eating other foods that may, in fact, make us sleepy or tired following a meal. So, how do we go about determining what type of signals we're going to get and how those signals might lead to us eating or not eating? It all boils down to feedback loops. And the feedback loops are going to be balanced in an effort to have normal feast and fast cycles throughout the day based on endocrine and nervous system signaling. Where we have distinct higher cortical signals, such as a desire to eat, along with signals coming away from the hypothalamus and the hindbrain, along with a system known as the endocannabinoidal system, which are all going to regulate our feeding behaviors, our gastrointestinal functions, and to a certain extent, our energy balance based off of do we have nutrients or not. So let's take a look at this big, wide scope of feedback loops. The first side of the feedback loop is all about do I have the nutrients necessary in order to maintain the energy balance that is set based off of how active I happen to be, in which we have swings in hormones such as ghrelin, insulin, glucagon, leptin, adiponectin, as well as enzymes and metabolites related to AMPK, as well as a couple of other types of signals such as adenosine and pyruvate, all triggering signals within the hypothalamus as well as within tissues throughout the body that will balance out so that we're not overutilizing our nutrients based off of what nutrients we might have that might actually drive us to go about eating more foods based off of the use or disuse of distinct types of fuels. On the other side of this, we start to eat. And as we start to eat, we see changes in our gastric motility, as well as changes in hormones coming away from glands and from tissues associated with digestion, which all will lead to signals back into the brain and into the hindbrain. That's going to limit how much food and how much eating we're going to do, as well as change what we're going to do as relates to seeking out food. So, we're hungry. What's going to drive us to start to eat? Well, we have a couple of signals that are going to come about coming away from areas within the hypothalamus, the ventral medial nuclei, the anterior nuclei, the paraventricular nuclei, as well as the lateral hypothalamic nuclei, which will either cause us to eat coming from the ventral medial and anterior nuclei, or cause us not to eat coming from the lateral hypothalamic. These areas are also referred to as the orexic centers, the ventral medial, the anterior, as well as the paraventricular nuclei, or the anorexic centers, the lateral hypothalamic nuclei. When we get signals of I don't have enough food, or when I have the signals for hunger, such as seeing food being cooked, smelling food being cooked that I really like, or having other signals such as seeing people eat, I'm going to see swings in changes within the ventral medial and anterior hypothalamic nuclei, the paraventricular nuclei, as well as possible have swings in peripheral hormones, such as an increase in ghrelin, an increase in glucagon, maybe a reduction in leptin or in insulin, or a reduction in GLP-1 or a reduction in PYY. Coming away from the paraventricular nuclei, the ventral medial nuclei, as well as the anterior nuclei, we're going to see signals that are going to cause a release of neuropeptide Y, which is going to cause activation along the dopaminergic pathway. The activation along the dopaminergic pathway is going to drive me to start to eat in an attempt to seek a reward response. This is going to cause me to get food. Now, I can override this with I want food, which means that even if I'm not hungry, even if I don't have swings in the hormones to indicate the need to eat, a desire, a cognitive desire to want food, will trigger a dopaminergic pathway response, which is going to cause me to seek food and to start eating in an attempt to get a reward response. As I start to eat, I'm going to get a reward response. As I get that reward response, I'm going to slowly stop eating because I have fulfilled the response that I want. Along with that, I'm going to see swings in hormones. So as I get fed, as I become satiated, those same hypothalamic nuclei are going to respond differently to new swings in the hormones, where we're going to see an increase in POI, an increase in GLP-1, an increase in leptin, an increase in insulin, and a reduction in ghrelin and in glucagon. What this is going to do is instead of elevating neuropeptide Y, we're now going to have an elevation of a secondary hormone known as POMC. POMC is going to inhibit the dopaminergic pathway and excite the serotonergic pathway. This is the same type of pathway we're going to see elevated when we have I've gotten my reward response. I don't need to keep doing the behavior. And so what this is going to do is this is going to trigger the stop eating response. It's going to stop me from getting more food and it's going to inhibit the desire to start eating. I can override this with the cognitive desire of no more food. That is, I do not want to eat, even if I'm seeing other people eating. This is where we can have the cognitive desire to continue a fast, even though everybody around us is eating. This is where we have to increase the cognitive desire not to eat, even if we might have swings in the hormones saying that we should eat, or even if we have the cognitive desire to eat because we're seeing everybody else eat. That's because eating is a social cognitive event, not just a physiological response to needing foods to meet the nutrient demands of the body. But what happens when we start to overeat? This is where I go from full to food coma. This is where we have the same type of swings taking place within the body that's going to lead to changes as we go about within the pathways that are going to lead to the I'm full or I'm satiated, where we see the swings in hormones, which is going to lead to the change in POMC, which is going to drive us to stop eating, which is going to give us time to rest and digest. However, if I continue to eat past that I'm satiated point, where I have excessive elevations of POMC, I'm going to excite a secondary pathway. I'm going to excite the production of melatonin and the production of endorphins, which is going to lead to the sense of food coma. That food coma is where I have excessive amounts of lethargy. That is, I am very, very tired and want to go to sleep. It's not because of specific things within the diet that I'm eating. It's not because of specific foods in the meal I'm eating. It's because of the amount of food that I'm eating within a single meal that leads to the elevation of POMC and the activation of melatonin and endorphins, particularly if we provided an environment that's going to lead me to want to become tired. Well, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Hopefully, got a bit out of the discussion here as it relates to what causes us to eat, what causes us not to eat, and the idea about food coma within the meals. There's more about this within the podcast on the same topic. Please make sure you listen to that. Please make sure to follow us on all the various platforms here on YouTube as well as on the podcast, the written stuff in Substack, as well as the quick takes on Instagram and on Threads.